All right, Bob, you were getting into market manipulation and going over how they're triple short what they normally would be for people that aren't involved in the stock market or things they don't understand. Then coming back, I want to get into the good news. The Federal Reserve is in a lot of trouble. National polls show that just 21% favor Ben Bernanke being reappointed as the Fed chairman. So we're going to be talking about that and playing some clips of his grilling yesterday. But Bob Chapman, continue.
Well, when you short something like gold bullion or silver bullion or gold stocks and silver stocks, you bet they're going to go down. And what you have to do eventually is you have to buy back the security that you sold even though you didn't own it. And in this case, it's gold bullion that we're talking about, and there's a silver bullion market, and I cover that all the time in the International Forecaster. But this is a record short. Now, who's short? The United States government's short. They're the ones who are in there shorting the gold and silver market, and they're shorting the shares as well. And at least with the shares, we get a good idea of the breakdown of who's doing what. On the bullion exchange and the COMEX, you can't tell because they won't tell you. They just give you a total whole figure of what they call commercials. But in the shares, you can tell because they have to state their positions. So we know that J.P. Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Bank of New York, Citigroup, Barclays, and on and on. These are the shorts in there. And we know how much they're short, just like we do in the bullion market. And so there's a concentrated effort for the last couple of months to drive down all of those prices. And also they've been in the commodity market as well, trying to hold those prices down. But that's a little bit more difficult to do because they're wider markets. And so that's what our government is doing in the market right now. And at the same time, they're trying to make the dollar go up, as I explained, and how they do that. And they also are trying to keep the stock market from falling.
So they're coming in with mountains. They're coming in with mountains of fiat derivatives, made up money, debt, and they're manipulating the market, trying to drive gold down. Please continue.
And they're not, as Alex said, and as Mr. Roberts said, at best they can keep it going for a day or two, and that's it. The dollar's going to go back down, the market's going to go back down, commodities are going to go back up, and gold and silver is going to go back up. So what do? You take advantage of the fact that the gold shares are down 10%, the coins are probably off 3 or 4 or 5%, and you go in and you buy if you can. You add to your collection if you can. And you take advantage of abnormal dip. It's my projection that gold will test $1,550 to $1,650 by the 1st of April. And I think that we'll get that high. I think that's where this run is going. And I think that we would have had a normal mini correction anyway. I mean, no markets go. We've had 21 of the 23 up days in gold. Well, you got to have a correction. People take profits. Not everybody is investors. Some of them are traders. So I expected somewhere between 25 and 150 points, and that would take gold back to somewhere in the vicinity of 1,100. Well, they've already done that for us. So what we have done is corrected the technical situation of being overbought. We'll get a little ground floor somewhere in here and to go right back up again.
Let me ask you this, Bob Chapman. Again, your predictions have always been devastatingly accurate here on air, so people are really taking notes. 2 weeks ago, they tried to dump, as you know, billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars of gold in the market, thinking that would drive it down. But instead, the Indians, the Chinese, and others grabbed it all up. Why was that manipulation to drive it down not successful, but this one has been?
I think that what they've done is they've gone and talked to these entities, such as India. Why did you go out and take 200 tons of gold down? And Sri Lanka and Mauritania, whose orders were relatively inconsequential. But I think they really leaned on the Chinese because the Chinese came out and said, well, we hope that this isn't a gold bubble here. Well, you got to be kidding me. The Chinese aren't that stupid. So that means that they were asked to say that to keep the price of gold from running further. And I'm sure the story that was given by Geithner to the Chinese was, look, if it backs off, you can buy it cheaper. We just don't we want it down for right now. And believe me, this sort of thing goes on. And so the Chinese come out and said something, and that didn't help the market. It backed off. What are the Chinese doing today? They're in there buying.
All right, I want to shift gears out of this area and get into what's happening with the Federal Reserve and unemployment numbers. We'll be right back. Okay, so there's a few minutes of that, and you can just go to YouTube and type in Bernanke Grilled, and there's just hundreds of these in the last few months. They've gone from treating him with reverence and shaking when he comes in, oh, Federal Reserve, oh, you are the God of our country, thank you for all you do, now to, hey, you're a bunch of crooks, we know you engineered this, we know you gave the money to yourself, you need to get in trouble. And now 311 sponsors. It's passed out a committee to audit the Fed, a strong bill to audit the Fed, auditing the Fed, as Bernanke has said, will destroy the Fed, because it's a private holding company for the big central banks. Bob Chapman, for those that may have just joined us, explain to people what the Federal Reserve is, how big this is, that we have 80+% of Americans in some polls wanting to abolish or audit the Fed. We have a new poll out, just 21% from Rasmussen, favor Bernanke's reappointment as Fed chairman. But it's not just Bernanke. It's like shark teeth. You pull out one tooth, another tooth rolls forward. We have to get rid of the shark itself, the private Federal Reserve banking dictatorship, don't we?
We certainly do, and I think we're well on our way to doing that. And, there's about 310 to 311 co-sponsors of the House bill, and it certainly looks like it's going to pass. And after the grilling that went on and the exposure that got right down to the nitty-gritty of what was going on, is going to throw this thing forward to be passed. And I think it'll be passed in the Senate. And I think we'll have a hard look at what goes on in the Fed. And the people aren't going to like it because it's been going on for 96 years. And when they look back and see all of these cycles, they were deliberately created. Maybe their predecessors at the Treasury Department during the 1870s and 80s and 90s and up until 1905 did a terrible job. Maybe they did. But these guys have done a hell of a lot worse, let me tell you. And so the Federal Reserve is privately owned, as Alex said, and there's 12 banks that own it. And then they have the top shareholders who have held the stock in the Fed since 1913, and they are American and European bankers. And the core, the very heart, the nexus of what goes on within the power behind government emanates from the Fed. This is the handmaiden of control of our entire country, our economy, our foreign policy. They control Congress through campaign contributions from both parties are involved. It isn't a Democrat or Republican thing. It's both of them. And I'm glad to see that Bernie was involved. And I like seeing socialists and conservatives together because, like you say, Alex, it throws out the left-right paradigm. Let's do what's good for America, and we'll sort all the other stuff out later. And so that's where we're headed with this thing.
Well, Bob, here's the problem. Like they did last October and like they've done in the last month, the private Fed chairman, the Treasury head, they come out and threaten and say, if you try to audit the Fed, that will cause the economy to implode. If you don't give us more money, the economy will implode. And it's just like one of the professors says in Fall of the Republic, this is like the end of Blazing Saddles, where they have the sheriff surrounded, the corrupt sheriff, and he puts a gun to his head and says, stop or I'll shoot. Or this is like suicide by cop. They're saying, you do what we say or we will destroy the economy. But we do what they say and they destroy the economy because they want to consolidate it. I mean, this is not going to be clean. This is going to be messy. But the beginning of the end for these people has begun, because now we've gone from 10 years ago, maybe 1 out of 20 people knowing the Fed was the real government, the shadow government, to now over 80% knowing It's the real government. And so they're not addressing puppet Obama, puppet Bush, puppet McCain, puppet Pelosi. They're addressing the real government. We're having a real dialogue now.
Yeah, we're attacking the real core of what's going on. And all of the peripheral things that you've just mentioned are secondary in importance. And so I am amazed that there's 80% of the people, and it shows up on the other side with the 21% who back Bernanke. I mean, that's 80% going the other way that don't. And so the public on this issue, from listening to your program and programs like it and on the Internet, they've gotten themselves educated. And very, very quickly, I think over the last 2 years, we've had this buildup of knowledge, which is fantastic. And if we can shut down the Fed